Right, if you just joined us, you're still on to Enterprise Morning, reaching you from Enterprise Television. Let's get to our conversation for today. The 2023 governorship candidate for All Progressive Congress APC in Rivers State, Tonye Cole, has stated that the presidential system of government being practiced in Nigeria is unsuitable for the country. Speaking on Channels Television's Politics today on Friday, Cole stated Nigeria must reconsider its current system of government and embrace one that is most suitable for its people. He explained that part of the reason the presidential system cannot work in Nigeria is that it can be exploited by a few people, adding that it has not built institutions that can hold people to account. Cole noted that every successful country has developed a system of government tailored to its unique context, citing Arab nations and China as examples of countries that rejected Western political models. He said, this American system that we call the presidential system in Nigeria, we need to go and redress it. We cannot import the parliamentary system of the UK and it will not work here. We cannot import a presidential system and it will not equally work here possibly. But let's get talking on that particular matter. I still have with me Emeka Maduna, good journalist, public affairs analyst. Thank you so very much for being here.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate you.
Yeah, hello, viewers.
So let's get talking on the presidential system of government. I do not know if our history has explained why we were colonized by the British, but we adopted the presidential system of government from America. How did we come to that?
Well, interestingly, thank you. During the colonial era, there were constitutional conferences, held at different times. That's why you had different constitutions, the Littleton Constitution, the Macpherson's Constitution in 1951, which actually, nodded us or nudged us in the direction of self-government. And of course, it was saying that, Nigeria has over 350 ethnic nationalities. And so for everyone to have a seat at the table, we looked at the point that the most suitable form of government was parliamentary system. The parliamentary system of government, such that you could make, provision for a broad coalition of parties to form the government, and to also, have a robust opposition. Now, when the 1966 coup happened, and the parliamentary system of government was done away with, the General Thomas Aguiyi, who took over, now instead of just trying to fix the issues on ground, as enunciated by the coupists, just went on with power. And then he enacted the Unification Decree 34, and with now centralized power in the government, at the center, centralized government, in Lagos at that time, But this wasn't. This didn't go down well with the northern, with the northerners, with the north, and so by July 29, 1966, there was a counter coup. Now, when that happened, people expected that, okay, if you said that, because one of the reasons they gave was the Unification Decree of Ironsi. Okay, if you said Ironsi's Unification Decree was not acceptable, why didn't you reverse it?
Back, exactly.
Why did you continue with it? Why didn't you restore? Why didn't you hold fresh elections and then restore power to, restore civilian rule? But no, because power is sweet, they continued with it until Gowon stayed in power for 9 years. Gowon, who emerged at the head of the state, stayed in power for 9 years and was just dancing about, concerning restoring democratic rule until he was kicked out in 1975. Then Muritala Mohammed came in, looked left and right, there was nothing. There wasn't, it wasn't as if he was really serious about restoring power, restoring power to civilians. He was overthrown in 1976, February 13. Then Obasanjo came in. Obasanjo now began to talk of, restoring the, civilian rule. But interestingly, instead of going back to parliamentary rule, he now jumped into the presidential system.
That's Obasanjo.
Yes. Now, look at it this way. Gowon he met the three, he met the regions, Northern region, Western region, Midwest region, and Eastern region. When you had the secession, May 30, 1967, Gowon now decided to create states in order to break the secession. Instead of going back to the regions that were brought together through the cobbling together of provinces, provinces that existed under colonial rule. So what happened? At the end of the day, Murtala Mohammed, instead of restoring the province, instead of restoring the regions, he went again to states, created 7 more states, making 19. Obasanjo came. Nigerians were expecting that, he was going to, restore parliamentary rule and all of that. The next thing he did was, he brought in the 1979 Constitution, which talked about a presidential system of government. And that wasn't what Nigerians were expecting. So that was where we missed the way. That was where we missed the way. Because the 1963 Constitution, the Republican Constitution that made Nigeria a republic, gave so much, gave a lot of latitude to the regions, and made them self-accounting, made it possible, for the regions to be able to take decisions. That was why they made a lot of revenue. They were able to do so many things: roads, farms, invested heavily in education. They did a lot of things, But what did you see? At the end of the day, we went to presidential system instead of parliamentary system. And the presidential system, we were not suited to it. Because, by the way, the parliamentary system married the parliamentary system of the UK with the American presidential system. So we had a prime minister, we had a president, the prime minister was the head of government, we had a president, and then we had the leader of opposition. It was a tripod, which really helped in balancing a lot of things. If Obasanjo had in 1979, if he had gone back to the regions, I think we would have had a sense, a semblance of, political balance. As of 1959, when the Willings Commission, made some recommendations concerning the minorities in the Niger Delta, there wasn't a conclusive consensus on what should be done for them. So those matters reared their head again. And today we can see how badly things have, turned out. So we're not just talking about the system of government. We're not talking about the interests of people who you don't know whether they want Nigeria to be or they don't want it. They want their own interests within Nigeria. In other words, they want to eat their cake and have it. And that's not possible. That's why you see that the whole system, looks as if it is warped. But for me, I think the parliamentary system is a helpful system. You see, the thing with Nigerian politicians is that they know how to just bring up solutions. They know how to bring up ideas without breaking them down into workable solutions. You are saying the presidential system will not work. The parliamentary system will not work. What is wrong with the presidential system? Okay, we can say the idea of winner takes all. But somebody has said, Dr. Kaide Fayemi, former governor of Ekiti State, at one lecture, he said we can have proportional representation. That's now bringing in a form of parliamentary system into a presidential system. Proportional representation, that okay, depending on the percentage of votes you have, that's what will determine what you will control. Some people have also talked about rotational presidency and all of that. But for me, the issue is not about the system. The problem is the people running the system.
Yes, because he actually, compared countries that have rejected the Western sort of development and all. China was one of those countries that he mentioned. But the truth is, don't you think, as much as we believe that politics is domestic, it's local.
It's local.
Yes. So don't you think at the same time that he might have a point, to state that we have not yet discovered the system of government that works for us, like the rotational system of government, which I would love to believe is more inclusive, because we have seen states in Nigeria. A very good example is Akwa Ibom State, where governorship is rotated between senatorial zones.
Yes,
right?
also in Anambra State.
Yes, so every senatorial district knows when its own turn would come. And when it is not its own turn, it supports the turn of the senatorial district that is producing at the time. And of course, that has made it possible for the peace, long-lasting peace we've seen in the state. So don't you think it's better if we can adopt our own system, which will work?
It cannot work.
And why do you think
it cannot work? In the north, they pay obeisance to their leaders, to their traditional rulers. In the east, they are Republican. In the west, you have the same thing, almost like the north. That was why, it was easier for Lord Lugard to institute a direct system, to use the indirect system of government. It was easier, but it was more difficult for him in the east. That was why he had to bring in warrant chiefs. The east didn't have traditional rulers in the east, but these people were warrant chiefs. Now look at what is going on all over the east. Autonomous communities, all kinds of characters turning up as traditional rulers. It was not there. It was not there. And you cannot come and impose one. Nigeria is not a homogeneous country like China. You see, China, they have some, linguistic and, ethnological differences. But they are not as deep-seated and deep-rooted as Nigeria. So it's not possible for you to come and, bring the Chinese model. It will not work. Or bring Russia, where Putin has remained a dictator for long, a despot. It will not work. It will not work. So the best thing is that parliamentary system, which ensures that it will be based, the power will be based on a consensus. You have 18 political parties in Nigeria, which is enough for you to form a parliamentary system. So if there is no consensus, you have a hung parliament. In that case, no party can actually form the government. Then they will go back to negotiation. Like what happened in 1951 when Awolowo was depending on the Ibadan People's Party. The NCNC depended on the Ibadan People's Party. That would have made him the premier of the Western region, Nnamdi Azikiwe. But Awolowo was able to convince them, and then they defected, leaving only, I think, Adeyemo Alakija was the last man standing, was the only man there. And then they moved to Action Group, and Awolowo became the premier. So, if you bring, that is politics in action, robust politics in action. So if you bring that parliamentary system, it will ensure that people are spread over. Using these 18 political parties, it will even be a fantastic takeoff point. Fantastic takeoff point. So in other words, you had three major contenders in the last election: Tinubu, Atiku, Peter Obi, in order of their votes. So you say Tinubu won, he would have maybe become the prime minister. Okay. Then maybe Atiku would have become the president. Then Peter Obi, leader of opposition. Okay. If you do it in that way, it will be seamless. So when you do another, then you now have to work very hard to make sure that the president, in another set of election, the president can say, okay, I work harder, I'll become the prime minister, the head of government. Then the president is prime minister, moves to become president. Maybe.
But I used to think that the prime minister and the president should work in sympatical. But a situation where we can have our own. Them are produced from different parties.
We can have our own.
Do you think there would be?
Why not? No, power will come from the parliament because the ministers will be chosen from the parliament. It's not as if you just go and bring somebody from nowhere and make him or her a minister. Ministers will be chosen. We can have our own variation. We can say, okay, instead of the president and the prime minister coming from the same party, they can come from different parties. And they can actually,
you think they can work together in unison?
The parliament is there, you know, to ensure checks and balances. Let me tell you, if you read The Fate of Africa, book The Fate of Africa, you will see where it was said that Nnamdi Azikiwe and Tafawa Balewa, remember, they were not on the same party. Azikiwe was NCNC, Tafawa Balewa was NPC, in Northern People's Congress. So they were not, they were not the same party. Allah was an action group, leader of opposition. So he said there that they kept having feuds, Zik and Tafawa Balewa.
Okay.
It even alleges that they were also romancing the military. That they were romancing the military, yes. That there could have even been a coup much earlier than 1966, much earlier than January 15, 1966. So, it's not as if they agreed on everything. No. There will be those feuds. That is why you have parliamentary lobby. They would have had to lobby members of the parliament, lobby them seriously. You know, you want to pass a bill, you have to lobby, you have to have a bipartisan agreement and all of those things. So in that way, people can find accommodation in all the political parties, in the 18 political parties. Excuse me. And if you start like that, it will be a good takeoff point with these 18 political parties. So you have 350 ethnic groups. Ethnic considerations will be taken, religious considerations will be taken, different considerations, partisan considerations will be taken. And you know, the big parties we have their own, with the support of the smaller parties. You see, so it's not as if, you see, the coups, even Gowon, who was a beneficiary of the coup of this counter coup of 1967 or 1966, has come out to say that was unnecessary. Yeah. He said January 66 coup was unnecessary. The July 2966 coup was unnecessary. And other coups were necessary. So the military incursion into politics was actually what just interrupted our political development. Because by now, if we had continued with parliamentary system, by now, Nigeria this year will be 65. If our parliamentary system had continued, by now we would have sorted out a lot of things, you know, a lot of all these things. Then we wouldn't have the situation where the Supreme Court will determine the winner of an election, like what happened in Imo State, where the person who came for the Supreme Court, it will not happen. Things like that will not happen because it's an aberration. It's an aberration. People turned out to vote. Somebody was declared the winner based on rotation over a zone. Emeka Edewa was declared. And then you now brought Hope Uzodinma from Olu zone after somebody, Rochas Okorocha spent 8 years from the same Olu zone. That's injustice. And that was brought about by the Supreme Court. You keep the judge, no, let them interpret the law. But let them not have power to decide who won the election. At the worst, they can say, okay, let there be a fresh election. But they should not have the powers. The court should not have the power to declare the winner of an election. It's an aberration. One man just sitting as a judge versus millions of people who turned out to vote. How dare you allow such injustice? Such an aberration. That is why you see what happened in Rivers State. Even matters that did not even appear for the attention of the Supreme Court, they jumped into them. The issue of local government, that was not even part of the brief. They were not even joined. You know, so we need to do away with all these aberrations. Because what you're finding now is that the judiciary is becoming a threat to our democracy. Yes, you heard the vice president, former vice president,
Yes,
saying that there are stories about lawyers taking bribes to judges. And the same lawyers will come out tomorrow to cry that democracy is under threat. A lawyer took a gift. When one judge's daughter was getting married, he was the one that delivered a gift from a party before the judge. Delivered the gift to the judge. And that was unethical. He was trying to say, not just a wedding. No, it's not just a wedding. That was unethical. And Yemi Osinbajo put his head on ethical practices are being done by lawyers. And you know that phrase that is not he who knows the law, but the lawyer that knows the judge, which is unethical. It's an abuse of law. So all of these things should be done away with. Let's practice politics without bitterness. The presidential system, winner takes all, will not work. It will not work because, you see, Nigerian politicians, no, it's working. Let me not say it will not, it has worked to some extent. It worked for 3.5 years. But sadly, Nigerian politicians demonstrated, their disregard for the rule of law. What we need to do, whether it is presidential system we decide on, or which is still long, we decide to preserve it, or we decide on parliamentary system, or we merge both, the main issue has to do with the operators of the system. The brigandage you see these days, look at the prejudice, the ethnic prejudice, religious bigotry. All of these things should not be a part of politics. It should not be a part of politics. You're coming to tell me that Nnamdi Azikiwe and Awolowo had an issue in 1951 and that Nnamdi Azikiwe sided with the North. All that is rubbish. Utter nonsense.
But it's a historical fact, isn't it?
It's not a fact. It was just an incident. There have been a lot of such. Remember, in the Second Republic, you had PPA, which was an alliance of some political parties. The UPN, the MPP, and I think GMPP also. So why not point to that? Why not point to that? There have been all of these things have been there. But you just keep bringing up one incident, which it would have been better for Awolowo and Zik if they were alive to have given us first-hand account. Not these third-party accounts we are getting. Because people will only say things that will suit their own interest. And there will be a lot of lies in between.
But looking at the capacity of Tonye Cole to have said this, he is widely traveled. He has had the opportunity that political opportunities with respect to information.
To running for election. He has never been elected.
Of
in
course,
any
I understand that.
Yes.
With regards to information that he has, a library, load of information that he has, don't you think there could be some salient, point to what he is trying to raise there?
Well, I cannot judge Tonye Cole because he has a right to his opinion, and I respect his opinion. But I will state my own opinion that I think that what we need to do is to marry the parliamentary with the presidential system, so that you can have a broader base, for people to take part in the political process, and that way I think our country will be the better for it.
Yes, but if we maybe get to marry parliamentary and the presidential system of government,
which we practice in the First Republic.
Which we practice in the First Republic, and of course that didn't even go anywhere past 10 years.
Because the military intervened, not because those systems were not working. Remember, there was brigandage.
Okay.
There was the Western House, of crisis, Western House crisis and all of that, which could have been prevented. You see, that's why I return again to the operators. The crisis in the Western Regional House could have been managed, could have been better managed, but it was allowed to fester, and look at where it landed us eventually. So, that even gave the military the impetus to say, yes, these civilians cannot handle leadership. But the military is worse. Yes, they are not equipped to handle leadership because that is a command and control structure. Whereas leadership is about politics. Leadership, in the sense that we have taken it, is about politics.
Well, if leadership is about politics and there are no dividends to the politics, of what use then is the politics in itself? Ibrahim Traore of Burkina Faso had said that democracy has never and would never work for any African
He will
country.
say it to favor his stay as a dictator. Ibrahim Traore is a dictator.
Why do we keep making the military regime look like it is the worst of them all? But we have seen military terms that are better, far better than because good governance, I guess, should be the mantra here. And
the irony in all of this things. You know the irony in all of these things. You have a point. You know the irony in all of these things is that it's the same civilians who bait the military. They bring the military to politics. But they forget that they are the ones who will still run the system. Look at what's happening in Rivers State. You remove the democratically elected governor, Sim Fubara. Then you now put an elected retired military officer there. And you think he'll do a better job. Has he done a better job? You may say that, okay, it was under the military, we had roads and all of that. Yes.
All the symbolic.
Yes, but who were those? Who were the ministers? They were civilians. They were civilians.
Yeah, that were made to do what they were supposed to do because they were...
No, because they thought. You see, that is a problem with when the human mind is deployed to mischievous ends. You think that somebody else, because putting on a uniform, will do a better job than you, when all you need is just build consensus. Look at what we have today. Okay, the APC is controlling the presidency. The APC is in the majority in the National Assembly, and yet, look at, they cannot steer the ship of state. Why?
Because the system is...
It's not the operators.
It's flawed.
No,
flawed.
No.
Okay, let's just...
How is it flawed?
Yes.
Is it the system that has made Tinubu to be collecting loans every market day? Is it the system that has made Tinubu to implement nepotism to such a disgusting level? Is it the system? It is not the system. It is not the system. When Muhammadu Buhari was the president, and he was being accused of nepotism, he said that these are the people I know. At the end of the day, the same Tinubu was running around him and saying, yes, he's doing well. He's not the one saying he inherited in fact, a bad government. Yeah. So what are we talking about? Is it not the same Madam Soshomole who said that Buhari will develop Nigeria, will make Nigeria better? Is it not the same Madam Soshomole thinking that we are forgotten? Is it not the same person coming out to say, no, that Tinubu inherited a bad government? You know, so the problem is when you have politicians who don't see truth, sincerity, honesty, and respect for the rule of law, they don't see these things as values. So they don't believe anything goes. And that is why the polity remains unstable. That is why you see people say that Nigeria is manifesting the symptoms of a failed state. Why? Because the operators are not ready to abide by the rules. Even if you have, look, the other day, chairman of APC, national chairman of APC, Ganduje, was talking about China. Does China condone corruption? Let's look at it. Does China condone corruption? So they just talk. China, because you see, why Tonye Cole says because he wants to still remain in the favorable books of those in power. That is the simple thing. If another party comes into power, he will change tack. He will just look at where are they facing. And that Nigerian positions for you. They lack ideology.
But looking at the system like we did mention again, if you take a look at the bicameral legislature that we practice now, you would agree with me that it's a total waste of everything.
Why?
Because the politicians who have taken over such responsibility they are seeing that as a career, and we can see that they've not produced anything yet.
No, there's nothing
wrong. They pass bills, and these bills do not reflect. So why not we have a unicameral legislature?
It will not still change.
That can still work.
No, it will not change anything. Look at, for instance, the issue of constituency projects. It was brought in by the executive to bribe the National Assembly. It is not in the Constitution. It's unconstitutional. It's an aberration. How can you think that a lawmaker who was elected to make laws, to legislate, will now leave that function and be looking for primary school to erect, to be looking for boreholes to sink. And that is why we are not making progress, because these people are sufficiently distracted. So we think, you know, the work of the local government, you now give it to lawmakers as concerned. It's wrong. All of those money just for bribe. Let them do their job and go away. If you tell me, okay, let it be a part-time legislature, I will agree. Part-time legislature, yes. But bicameral, America has bicameral legislature. The UK has a bicameral legislature, the House of Lords. And the House of Lords, mind you, they are unelected. They are just chosen from, you know, very influential members of the society. You know, they have the House of Commons. So, and the House of Lords, they have so much influence in the UK. So how do you now balance things out? You know, by saying unicameral, bicameral. In the First Republic, we had a parliament. But what happened? What happened? At the end of the day, what happened? So, what we need is this. Let us dedicate ourselves to building our democracy with respect for the rule of law. 1. 2, let the military remain in the barracks. They cannot handle political power because their style, their orientation is command and control. You know, so they do not have the temperament or the training for negotiation, politics, you know, and all of those things that come with politics. They don't have, they don't have the, you know, they are not trained. They don't have that orientation. Then let our politicians behave properly. They themselves, they know. They themselves know that the things they are doing, that those things are wrong. Look at in Imo State. The governor brought somebody to replace the chief judge. Even when people were telling him that it was wrong, that the way the former chief judge was removed was unlawful. He still went ahead. He was supported by the rubber stamp House of Assembly. But what happened? The National Judicial Council overruled it. And then, okay, we'll abide by it. What came over them when they were going in that direction?
But if we take a look at that, just before we let go on this particular segment, Tonye Cole equally mentioned the Middle East, made mention of Qatar, made mention of the UAE.
They will just be bringing...
how that these people domesticated their politics, and it's working awesomely.
The problem is not UAE. You see, look. You see, don't let these politicians bamboozle us. They will bring up all kinds of... You see, and maybe because the program just had a limited span. So there wasn't the opportunity to interrogate, to ask him questions. To the point that he will go back on what he said. Why is he bringing Qatar? Why is he bringing UAE? These are kingdoms now. These are kingdoms that employ civil servants to run. They don't employ politicians now. They employ civil servants now to run their system. So how can you be bringing those? Are you now saying that we should now elevate traditional rulers to the level of to rule this country? Let's get serious. Let's get serious. Our problems are more than just which system or the other. There is no system that is not helpful. Mm-hmm. There is no system that we cannot operate. What we need is sincerity. Yes. That's all. If we are sincere, we will not, you know, have issues concerning the system of government to adopt. We will not have issues. But the problem is, I just gave you the example of the chief judge of Imo State. And then you look at other issues like that. Look at the impeachments. Orji Kalu was governor of Abia State. He had one deputy governor for his first term, had another deputy governor for his second term. Is that how to run a state? And then when there are problems tomorrow, you'll be blaming the system. No. Look at the governors who have been impeached. They've gone to court. At the end of the day, the courts restored them. Why do we have staggered elections today in Nigeria? Because of the operators because we had irresponsible operators of the system. Why was Peter Obi impeached? Rotimi Amechi and all of them. whose removal altered our political calendar, electoral calendar. Why? Why? Because somebody somewhere just sat down. Oh, I don't want Peter Obi. He should be removed. For doing what? Then let's do away with this obnoxious godfatherism. It's not helping our nation. Baba Sokwe, all those things are just anachronistic. We should do away with them. Bring people. When you want to go into power, you woo the people. Woo the people. Let's stop all these things as if we cannot do them. Because the rest of the world is moving ahead. Developing systems. We have treaties to which Nigeria is a signatory. Why are we not, the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, why are we not adhering to it? Why are we not adhering to the Constitution? Some of the actions of President Bola Tinubu, are they constitutional? Why are we not adhering to it? Why? And so when you look at it, we are our own enemies. Nepotism. You want to hold census. You appoint members of the census committee. You leave out the Southeast. You leave out the South-South. You leave out the Northeast. Is that how to run a country? Why do you have federal character? Why do you have federal character? Why do you have quota system? These things are to take care of inequities. Areas where some parts of the country might be left out. Our politicians are the problem. They are delinquent, they are irresponsible, and they have no fear of the Constitution. They don't even have the fear of God.
Very true.
And that is why the country is the way it is. There is no system we cannot operate. If politicians can get over themselves, can really control themselves, control their ego, we will not have any problems. When Obasanjo sold the refineries, when Obasanjo sold the refineries, he gave reasons for taking that action. Yar'Adua came in. He issued a memo admitting that the 2007 elections, that brought him in as president, that they were flawed. He and Obasanjo fell out. In anger, Yar'Adua scrapped the sale of the refineries. Are we not suffering it today? Just ego between two men. Just ego. If Obasanjo has subjected that action to a public hearing at the National Assembly, it would have, Yar'Adua would have had hesitation, in taking such an action, in reversing it.
Very true. It's often said that it's only a lazy man that blames his failure to the tools that he have with him. Our Nigerian leaders have often blamed the system, for their own failure. It's not rocket science to make any country a better place. Lee Kuan Yew did not, even with what he had, when it was rejected, when Singapore was rejected by Malaysia, because they saw Singapore like a fishing ground that wasn't up to par. Lee Kuan Yew took up the challenge and said and promised his people he was going to take Singapore from a nothing country to a first world country, and in less than 20 years he did exactly that. So there's no excuse, there's no reason for our leaders not to do the same. But of course, if the intention is not there, then even if they have the best of systems, they would not even get the results like we see today in Nigeria. Thank you so very much, Emeka, for being part of the show today.
Thank you very much.
All right, people, that's just the time we have for our show today. Love to believe you enjoyed this, just like we did right here. Please do well to follow us. If you may, you can see us at Enterprise TV news.com. You may equally like, comment, and follow us on all our social media platforms at Enterprise TV7. I am Henry Igwebike. Thank you for watching. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.